We are now live, and welcome to the MapGive AI-assisted Mapathon, Part 1. It's a very special day for many reasons we'll be discussing about, and I'm joined by the lovely Erica Nunez as my co-host, and we also have our colleague Laura Klein here as part of our MapGive initiative. So, what is our MapGive initiative? Well, MapGive is a U.S. Department of State initiative that encourages and increases volunteer participation in the global mapping community and facilitates the creation of open geographic data to support humanitarian relief and development programs. You can help map any place in the world, even if you've never been there before. Visit our website at mapgive.state.gov to find out why you should map, learn how to map, and start mapping. Also follow us at Twitter at MapGive for future events. And while you're following us on Twitter, why don't you tell them more about where specifically in state we're out of, Erica, so they could follow us at state as well.
Sure. So hello everybody. So the MapGive team, myself, Tom, and Laura at the moment, we are all analysts and developers in the Humanitarian Information Unit, which is within the State Department's Office of the Geographer and Global Issues. So we are a multidisciplinary unit that provides impartial analysis and serves as an information sharing node between our unit, humanitarian partners, and State Department policymakers. And we have a huge emphasis on geographic approaches to analysis and decision making, and we do a lot of promotion of the importance of geospatial data to decision making within the department and through initiatives like the MapGive initiative that we're highlighting today. So, so maybe Tom can continue on with a little bit more about that MapGive initiative.
Yeah, well, you know, not only are we having into educational purposes and trying to work a lot with students, but we also provide satellite imagery services on occasion when it's needed, as well as throw events like today. So glad to throw, you know, our first major Mapathon at the end of the summer, the second biggest one this year. And not only that, it's a special day because we're partnering with two special partners, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR, and also the company Maxar. However, we've been partnering with PEPFAR for quite a while, haven't we, Erica?
Yeah, we have. That is a very true statement, Tom. We've been working with PEPFAR for a few years now to set up open mapping projects through the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team Tasking Manager that are in areas that are high priorities for PEPFAR to support public health efforts. We actually have a live hot tasking manager project on our MapGive website. Almost, I think we've consistently had PEPFAR projects as our highlighted projects since we first started collaborating a few years ago. So yeah, it's a really strong partnership, and we're glad that it gives us this opportunity to reach out to students like the ones that are participating today. We definitely, I think our first PEPFAR engagement was between PEPFAR and the number of youth members drafters as the power behind the mapping project. So we're looking forward to continuing collaborations like that.
Great. And we also want to mention that this is the first time we're partnering with Maxar for a Mapathon. We always see each other at conferences. I think it was just a matter of time until we teamed up for an activity. I like to think of Maxar as an engine for remote mapping. All of those mouse clicks have to hover over something, and Maxar premium satellite imagery is the premium fuel needed to make tons of useful map data. Not only is Maxar satellite imagery behind probably almost like every web map we use, but they're a strong player when it comes into mapping technology and geospatial analysis. So some of you may be wondering why this is the AI-assisted Mapathon Part 1. Will there be a Part 2? Well, we certainly hope there might be. We believe that artificial intelligence, or AI, is here to stay. Just think about how prevalent it's becoming in our lives, whether that's trying to recommend what songs we may like or being able to find cats in photos. We're seeing it more frequently being applied to satellite imagery as well. That is why we reached out to Maxar, one of the leaders in this space, so they can tell us what is the state of AI mapping and how we could expect to see more of it in the future. Erica, what are some of your thoughts on AI?
That's a really good question, and it's a fair question to ask me. I think that we're all really well aware that AI-assisted mapping or that automated processes to create more geospatial data that makes it into OpenStreetMap is a really consistent topic over the last few years that's garnered a lot of attention. And I think it was just really important for us to better understand workflows that did improve data quality or seek to standardization or aim towards the completeness of the map. It was really important for us to understand what workflows might be out there that still included this key piece of human participation, and these participatory workflows that we've realized are so important over the years and are really what makes open mapping as impactful as it is. So we've been really excited to collaborate with Maxar and better understand these things, or at least I am. I'm excited that the training is recorded, and I'll probably watch it over again myself. So we're looking forward to seeing what we might be able to show you all today that might inspire you to duplicate these workflows in other areas that might be of interest to you. And we're extremely open to continuing conversation after this event. So please feel free to reach back out to us if anything inspires. Thanks, Tom.
And finally, it's a special day because of all of you out there, our participants. Thank you for joining us today. We're also celebrating today the third and final event for MapGive Summer Virtual Class of Interns. They are all part of Delta Phi Epsilon at the University of Southern California. They're a premier foreign service society. We have also invited our new class of virtual interns for the 2020-21 school year. We truly enjoy working in this program. They do a lot of the map data for the projects we support, and we also present to them different use cases of how crowdsourced data can be analyzed and utilized. Also, shout outs to George Mason Mappers, George Washington University Humanitarian Mapping Society, and also for the many youth mappers chapters that are out there, especially to the chapters in Nigeria who we were connected with, FUTA, GSU Mappers, and the Unique Mappers team. That's a lot of universities out there. It makes me think of how students have to set goals and they have a lot of homework to do usually. And we don't want to disappoint our students out there, Erica. Do you want to break down what goals we have for today's event?
Yeah, while I lay out the homework for today, Tom, I think that it's not just me. I think I've gotten a couple of messages that your screen might have gone gray. So I fix that. I'll share some of our assignments or really just our goals for today to help us get towards some progress on these projects. So we're asking that beginners please aim to get 50 points on the MapRoulette task. We also think that advanced users on the advanced MapRoulette task might be able to actually finish the amount of work that's laid out today in just the hour. So we're going to hold you all to that high standard. And for the intermediate mappers that are focusing on the tasking manager project, given the density in those areas, we're setting the more modest goal of just completing one task. And so if everybody sets those goals, then we can make some more progress on these tasks today. And I think everybody is familiar with there being much more mapping to be done after a mapping event, so we definitely plan to see these projects through to completion. So any questions that you have, feel free to stay in touch with us over the weekend or over the next week or so if you can't reach our 100% goal today or want to reach a bigger goal by the end of the week. And I know that points and squares and this kind of thing might not make sense to everybody yet, so no worries, after the training it will. But yeah.
I'm excited. We're really getting close to starting now with our first presentation. I want to thank the Maxar team for helping us plan this event for the past several months. Matt Gibb, Josh Siskind, Madison Musgrave, and Olivia Gilliam have all been great to work with. They're going to be starting off with the first presentation about AI mapping technology and different Maxar technology. And then we'll follow it with a project introduction of, the who, why, and where we're mapping Nigeria, presented by Laura Klein from U.S. State Department and the MapGive initiative. And she has a new program she'll be introducing, followed by Kiefer Gonzalez from the Center of Disease Control. And he works at PEPFAR, and he's a GIS analyst there, and he'll be presenting. And then after this, we'll transition to MapGive, and he'll talk about basically the 3 different mapping projects we have for beginners, intermediates, and advanced mappers. And then the mapping will begin, and we'll be mapping. Erica right now is going to mention the Q&A we'll be doing during the mapping, and then we'll conclude sort of showing some metrics. So without further ado, Erica, do you want to mention to them the different tools they should be paying attention to?
Yes, without further ado, a quick logistical update. So we just want to make sure that everybody sees the chat bar on the right-hand side. If you select the blue talk button, that should pull it up if it doesn't automatically show up. And in case I've seen some questions about it, so just for you all to know, only the panelists will have video and audio abilities until the mapping section, where we might take some audio questions from the audience at that time. And within the chat or Q&A, I find that if I tell people to use one or the other, everyone ends up using both regardless. But it is easiest for us to manage questions in the Q&A section for the presentation. Please feel free to ask questions in real time, but seeing that we're farther along in our agenda than we planned, I think that we'll hold on answering any longer answers until that mapping portion, which is a little bit more open-ended. So please ask your questions in real time, and we might get to them closer to 4:45 or 5:40. Okay, that's it for the logistical note. I'll let us get to the real meat of everything.
Okay. So Erica, would you like to load up the slides?
Yes. Apologies for my computer's desires to, it's just an AI trick. Okay. Matt, I'm getting a little bit of a lag, and so I'm not able to see exactly which slide that I'm on.
Okay.
Can you let me know when I...
Yes. Could you just move ahead 3 slides? And that way we'll be good to go. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Gibb. I work at Maxar. I support our open mapping work, as well as leading on some of our validation and tradecraft workflow for mapping. So really happy to be here. Thank you to the Department of State for reaching out to us. I've been interacting with Tom and Erica for several years to this point, so it's great that we're able to do a Mapathon together. So today, myself and Madison Musgrave from Maxar, we're just going to briefly talk about some of the artificial intelligence and machine learning, as well as and how we can use that in open mapping, as well as Maxar's open data program. So just a brief sort of high-level overview of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Artificial intelligence is the study of training machines to perform tasks that typically would require human intelligence. Like Tom mentioned, finding pictures of cats, or setting an alarm, or maybe programming your thermostat in your home. Those are all types of artificial intelligence that can sort of assist with doing tasks that a human would normally do. Now, machine learning is a field within artificial intelligence where a system can then learn and improve based on its experience and additional training. And so that's going to be a little bit what we talk about here today. So the next slide, please, Erica. So at Maxar, one of the things we support is creating a foundational geospatial data set that the Maxar production team has explored as a means to enable a more efficient data collection and validation method for points of interest. As part of this process, there are numerous objects that are able to be detected in satellite imagery and used to support different mapping efforts. Single-class object detection models have been trained for many features, things like helipads, bridges, airfields, power facilities, sporting facilities, hospitals, and communications towers, with the development of models to assist in reducing false positives, as well as providing support in different classification layers, which sort of help to choose between, is this a school or is this a hospital? Large buildings that may sort of look similar. So as many of these features are different in physical size, we use a number of different image chip sizes or zoom levels with a relationship for when features are identifiable with the scale and resolution of the imagery. All imagery used for training data comes from Maxar's imagery archive and is processed via Digital Globe cloud services using our 30 to 50 centimeter 3-band RGB imagery. And so to support our COVID-19 open data program, which Madison is going to talk about shortly, we are also releasing over 800 object detection results to be used in conjunction with the imagery released earlier this year. So part of our task for this Mapathon will be verifying these objects and adding them into OpenStreetMap where appropriate. Can you skip ahead 2 slides? Perfect, thank you. So how can we actually use artificial intelligence and machine learning in mapping? So one way is through the detection of foundational features. These are discrete segmented features. Think of this is a rectangle building or this is a linear road. You may, if you're familiar with the OpenStreetMap community, you may have already used some of these tools. So many companies and organizations are releasing data with licensing friendly to support OpenStreetMap. We have the Maxar Open Data Program. Microsoft has released building footprints for all of the US, all of Canada, all of Tanzania, all of Uganda. And Facebook has created their Rapid editor and has released road features for almost every country in the world. And so all of these data sets are available for use in OpenStreetMap, which can assist mappers in creating this foundational data set, things like buildings and roads. And so that way, mappers can, spend more time, adding additional detail to buildings, better attribution, and less time having to trace each individual building or road. Next slide. The other way that you can use machine learning in mapping is through directed mapping. And this is more general object detection rather than the individual discrete features. So things like using object detection and predictive analytics to identify potential features or areas of interest based on your specific criteria. The process that I showed a few slides ago identified a number of features, things like airports, sporting facilities, burial sites, things like that. These object detection workflows help reduce the area needed to review for specific features. So you no longer have to pan over the entire city to find a soccer field or a school. You can now sort of take the mapper directly to that area and then let the mapper make the final judgment call based on the imagery and whatever other information they have to make that final decision before adding it to OpenStreetMap. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Next slide. This is a lot smaller, or a lot bigger when I put it on the slide. What we want to be able to do is support mappers by intelligently directing them to the features that are important to their mission. So today we're able to support MapGive and PEPFAR with the release of our open data imagery, as well as this object detection data set that we can use to help identify features that are important to PEPFAR and their mission and their local partners in Nigeria. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Madison, who's going to talk a little bit about our open data program.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name is Madison Musgrave, and I am the coordinator of the Open Data Program at Maxar. And I am also a part of our Sustainable Development Practice, which is a group that's focused on supporting nonprofits and NGOs. If you could go to the next slide, please, Erica. So the Open Data Program was established in January of 2017, so we are currently in our 4th year of the program. And so far, we've activated for 46 events, ranging from wildfires to hurricanes, as well as the current COVID-19 pandemic. And when we created the Open Data Program, we wanted to help support organizations that are on the ground responding to natural disasters in real time. But we also wanted to create a community of users that understand the power of geospatial data and can use that data to better understand the effects of natural disasters and use that knowledge to better plan for events in the future. If you could go to the next slide, please. We do have an established protocol for open data event activations, and this is available on our open data site if anybody is interested in looking at that document. We generally activate for natural disasters that can be classified as sudden onset natural disasters, like an earthquake or a hurricane, but the program is flexible and we have a committee that votes on each event, so we can adapt to new things like the COVID-19 pandemic, which was an unprecedented event for all of us living through it, so we decided to activate the program in response to the pandemic. For each event, we release before and after imagery. And this imagery is delivered as 3-band pan-sharpened imagery and is posted to the open data site as a cloud-optimized GeoTIFF. And once the event has been activated, all of the data remains on the open data site in perpetuity. So if anybody is interested in going back and looking at the history of all of the events that we've activated for, that data is still available. Depending on the event, we may also release additional types of data to accompany the imagery, like building footprints, heat maps, flood maps, weather reports, and we're always looking for new organizations to partner with that can add value to our imagery, and we can post that on the site as well. All of the data that is available on the open data site is available under an open, non-commercial Creative Commons license, and the full licensing language is also available on the site. And one of the great things about the Open Data Program is that we do have an OpenStreetMap exception, which means that all of the data and the imagery that's available on the Open Data site can be added to OpenStreetMap. If you go to the next slide, please, Erica. So this is just an overview of the program last year. I just wanted to show this to kind of display the different kinds of events that we respond to. In the middle is just some logos of the different kinds of large organizations that utilize the data that's available on the open data site. But this is just some of the organizations that use the data. We respond to events all around the world. So last year, events spanned 10 different countries, and we released over 300,000 square kilometers of imagery, which was valued at over $7 million. So Maxar is really committed to the open data program, and I'm always looking for ways to grow the program, both in terms of the groups that we work with and the types of data that we provide on the site. If you go to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, and as we all know and are currently experiencing this unprecedented global pandemic that we're all living through, we knew that we had to do something unique in the response with the open data program. Rather than just posting imagery strips like we do for most events, we posted metro area mosaics, so large base map mosaics over a large number of metropolitan areas around the world. Another thing that we did differently this time is we allowed users of the open data program to request additional data to be added to the site, which was something that we had never done before. 3 of the cities that were released through the open data program are cities that you all will be mapping today during the Mapathon. And the vector data that Matt mentioned earlier is also available on the open data site for download, and that will be validated by users during the Mapathon today. And then if you want to go to my last slide, please. And so I just think today is a great example of collaboration between Maxar and an organization like HIU using the data imagery that's available through the open data program. So I'm always excited and looking for new ways to collaborate. So if anyone is interested in other events that we could do together or ways that we could exchange data, please feel free to reach out to me, or the open data program also has its own inbox set up. And if you're interested in being alerted every time information is added to the open data program site, you can go to that link, and if you navigate to the bottom of the screen, there's a little sign-up sheet. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Madison. Next, I would like to introduce Laura Klein from our very own Humanitarian Information Unit. Laura wears many hats. She is our West Africa analyst, and as well, she's a director of a brand new program called the city's COVID mitigation mapping program.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us all today. We're really happy to have you here. We are looking forward to getting started with our mapping. Wanted to set the stage just a little bit with the sort of mapping that MapGive does around health-related issues and also around COVID a little bit as well. Now, we don't often get to say this, but there is a good news story regarding mapping and health. And so we found out last week, and actually earlier in the summer as well, that a virus that had paralyzed thousands of children in Africa for the past 3 decades, the wild polio virus, is now declared by the WHO to be completely eradicated in all of Africa and in Nigeria as well. That means that more than 95% of Africa's population is now immunized and protected for life from the wild polio virus. And that wouldn't be able to be done without all of the hard work and sacrifice, partnerships and cooperation, and having the right tools and information to get the job done. Mapping was a critical part of that. Groups such as eHealth Africa partnered with the government, with open mapping groups, to include even university mappers such as yourself. University of Vermont team was involved as well. And they used maps that were created through open data so that they could track vaccination teams, they could track the delivery of vaccines, and they could use this data for planning new vaccination and immunization campaigns. So that's why we've asked you to join us today. And we want to thank you for spending your time with us for these couple hours this afternoon, East Coast time, but I know we have many members around the world, including some spending their evenings with us. Thank you. You will contribute to ensuring that the right tools and information will be in the hands of the user. Geolocated data, particularly open data with roads, buildings, and these newly derived AI features, which we're very excited to be partnering with Maxar for our first Mapathon together and piloting these, will be critical for the health workers and humanitarian partners being able to plan for immunizations and other preventative activities, as well as being able to respond as needed. Now we know that we've got a lot of tasks, mapping tasks that will be set out for you. One thing just to remind you, Erica hit record as we got started today, so this recording will be available if you want to come back and take another look. All of the data, the mapping that doesn't get finished out, the map tasks, will be up and available on the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Tasking Manager until they get completed. So as Erica mentioned, stick with us throughout today, throughout the weekend. As you have a chance, let's try and work together to finish this out. As we know, there's presently a tremendous need for humanitarian and health response around the world, including in the U.S., the African continent, and to include Nigeria, related to the coronavirus and COVID-19. For setting the context for today's Mapathon and the 3 cities that we're looking at in Nigeria, as of Monday, according to Nigeria's Center for Disease Control, the 3 states where these cities are located rank as having the 1st, 3rd, and 9th highest number of lab-confirmed cases out of the total of 36 states in Nigeria. But we know that not only, it doesn't end today. For MapGive, not only are we co-hosting this Mapathon, but we're moving forward and standing up a program, as Tom briefly mentioned, where we'll be partnering with 3 regional hubs, one each in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and working on multiple city-level projects with partners around the world to focus on identifying and creating tools and resources that can help mitigate local COVID impacts through mapping and analysis. You can find out more and get involved coming back to our website in another month or 2. We will have a COVID-19 section set up on our mapgive.state.gov website to share these stories, the methodologies, and the lessons learned over this mapping partnership program that will be running over the next year. As we know, the coronavirus is not just a health crisis, but due to the necessary closures and other restrictions, there has been considerable impact to economies. And so we're looking at informal sectors, education, and even food security. And mapping can help inform all of this, not just food, not just health, and other specifics. Today, this is MapGive's 2nd virtual Mapathon focused on health, since the start of the coronavirus at least. But there will be many more MapGive and partner activities where we'll be sharing the value of mapping and geospatial analysis to address humanitarian concerns surrounding COVID-19. We hope you'll join us for many of these future activities. As Erica mentioned and as Tom mentioned, we do have our Twitter handles at MapGive, at State HIU. We'll have our website. Please keep up with us and keep in touch and involved. Without further ado, let me introduce Kiefer Gonzalez, a U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, GIS analyst, working at the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, PEPFAR. I've had the pleasure of working with Kiefer and other analysts focusing on global HIV and AIDS response over the years, and they've always demonstrated to me how important it is to not only have map data for the locations where they're working, but also that it's critical that every stakeholder involved in response is aware of the value of having accurate map data and has a basic knowledge of how maps can support and inform their work. So to let us know the value of the map data and the use of maps during their work, I hand it over to Kiefer. Thank you for joining us today, Kiefer.
Thanks for having me. So, hey everybody, Kiefer. I just wanted to, if you want to go ahead and flip to the next slide real quick. So, I've already been introduced a few times, but for anyone that's not familiar with PEPFAR, it was started in 2003 and stands for the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. It's really rolls off the tongue. But basically what we are is the lead government initiative to responding to the international HIV epidemic. And while it's led by State Department, specifically Dr. Deborah Birx, who those of you in America are probably familiar with because she's been on TV somewhat recently, it's also comprised of 9 different agencies. Obviously, I'm with CDC within that general PEPFAR umbrella. So within that group too is a subgroup called ICPI, which is basically the part of PEPFAR that handles all visualizations. So PEPFAR by nature collects a lot of data in all our programs, and they have specifically our group, ICPI, which is comprised of all these different agencies to visualize that data into maps, charts, dashboards, anything that's just not numbers, basically. And so that is my team. And that is what this data will eventually be feeding into. Go ahead, flip to the next slide. So this kind of does a good job of just giving you like an overview of what's going on. I'm not going to get too deep into it. The point here is that there are millions of people in Nigeria that have HIV/AIDS, and the prevalence is pretty large at 2.8. But in response to that, the U.S. government through PEPFAR has spent billions of dollars since 2004 to help mitigate and get people on treatment. Go ahead, next. So when you break down that 3 million number, you start to see some trends, right? So for instance, similar to other countries, women are more likely to have HIV, and they have a much higher rate. Go ahead, flip to the next slide. And if you break it down a little bit further, this data is a little outdated, being from 2017, but gives you a good idea of how, when you break it down by age too, you can see that gender gap even more significantly. In certain age brackets, you'll have women that are almost twice more likely to have or contract HIV than males do. Next. So that sounds very bleak, but since PEPFAR has really started going in 2004 in responding to Nigeria, we've made great strides. We have, again, this graphic is a little outdated. So we have about over 1 million people on treatment, and not only on treatment, but staying on treatment, which is the most important part when you're responding to HIV/AIDS. You want people to stay on treatment so they're what they call virally suppressed. That means that they are significantly reducing their chances of spreading the disease and also acquiring any kind of complications from the disease. We've also put more emphasis on mother-to-child transmission, as you can see in the lower graphic there. And that kind of ties into what I mentioned earlier about women being more affected. You want to make sure that it doesn't get passed on to the kids as much as possible. Next slide. So, within PEPFAR, they have what they call the 90-90-90, which is the idea that 90% of the population should be aware of their HIV status, positive or negative, and of those positive HIV patients, 90% of them should be receiving regular treatment. And then of those population receiving regular treatment, 90% should be virally suppressed, which, as I mentioned before, means that they're significantly less likely to feel the side effects of the disease or spread it. So again, this is a little outdated. So at this point, in a lot of PEPFAR countries, we've done really well to the point where it's actually moved up from 90-90-90 to 95-95-95, and Nigeria is no different. So a lot of these numbers are actually much higher. So we've just, as the years have gone by, improved dramatically within the country in responding to the disease and the epidemic. Next slide. And so what we'll be mapping here, unfortunately, the slide got a little messed up with the circles here, but this will generally tell us where the mapping projects we'll be looking at today are. You can see over in the south, near the capital, is where 2 locations are, and then the top yellow bubble should be over there slightly to the left on Kano, I believe. And that's just kind of to orient everyone here geographically of where in the country we'll be creating features for. Next slide. And then this is the same thing, just in table form. You can see kind of where everything is compared to the other states within Nigeria. Next slide. So we get asked a lot, right, that what exactly are we going to do with this data? And it's both an easy and a hard question to answer. And I think to start to answer, you want to back up a little bit. So why we're all here is for, obviously, Maxar's machine learning AI and to support PEPFAR programming. But it is creating data within OpenStreetMap, and by nature is open source. So we're not the only ones that are going to be using this data. I mean, this data will be used by other global health agencies back when polio wasn't eradicated, malaria, cholera. We all use very similar data inputs, very similar processes, with just slightly different outputs depending on the global health response you're working with. But even outside of global health, once you create this data, then local governments can use it as well. If there's any kind of natural hazard-based disaster, people can use that when responding to that as well. Or just literally anything, That's the beauty of open source data. You can use it for whatever you need to use it for. To try to kind of narrow it down for our purposes, we want to try to implement this data as it starts becoming more complete and more reliable as it gets verified by several layers of crowdsourcing to first supplement our program surge. So right now in Nigeria, as I mentioned before, with the 90-90-90 of people trying to identify people who have HIV and get them on treatment, there's what they call a surge. And they really want to just continue to work to up that 1 million number to get closer to that 3 million number of HIV patients within PEPFAR and make sure to get all 3 million of them on treatment, regular treatment. And that's going on right now. And this will help once you kind of have verified infrastructure data to help narrow down areas to focus. Proximity analysis is something that, again, not just us, but other global health responses will also use, which is basically kind of this little image here on the bottom, where you have your health facilities and you have urban areas and polygons, and you start creating little catchment polygons basically to see how many people are theoretically serviced by that health facility. And see then, as you get more information at such a granular level, determine, if there's enough there to satisfy the need of the community. Like if all of a sudden we create a bunch of buildings where there wasn't before and we realize that the area is much bigger than we thought, do we need to take a closer look and see if we need to fund more than one health facility in this area? Or are we funding maybe too many in a place that doesn't have as many people? Things like that. While these won't necessarily make those decisions, like all maps, they help feed into the decision-making process and are one part of it. You can also start to combine this data with other sources. For instance, when you create buildings, you can start combining it with census data and start coming up with a really generalized population. You can also use the roads and combine it with geography to check out slope and start determining are health facilities in places that are easily accessible. Like, yeah, maybe it's next to a road, but is that road, how does it look geography? Does it have a high slope? Is it hard for people to go on? Is it really the most optimal place for the population it's trying to serve? And from there, you can do a bunch of other things as well. Go ahead to the next slide. Yeah. So this here is just to give you guys a preview of what we'll be mapping, or what it kind of looks like right now, I should say, probably. So some of the areas are relatively well mapped, like over here. You see there's just some blanks, mostly around buildings and some minor roads. Go ahead, next slide. And then some are a little more empty and require a little bit more mapping. And then one more. And then some, like over here, require quite a few mapping and are very dense. And you can see kind of how that gap affects, how you're trying to plan for these areas when you have all this density here and it's just not reflected in any kind of geographic sense as of right now. But that's where everybody else comes in, right? And that's why we're all here today, to help fill in those gaps. And yeah, that's all from me. So I think Matt is next, potentially.
Yes. Please, Matt is going to share his screen now, and we'll get ready talking about the different projects.
All right, I think I have the power now. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
I could see that.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have, as the invitation on Eventbrite said, we're going to have sort of 3 different tracks that people can choose to help contribute to today. And Kiefer, thanks so much for that introduction, because it really drives home the point of, the impact that we are able to have based on the different projects that we have going today. So I'm not going to spend time on getting people set up with OpenStreetMap. If you do not already have an OpenStreetMap account, please go to openstreetmap.org and you can sign up for an account just up here in the top right. It'll say sign up. If you do already have an account, awesome. We're going to dive right in. Again, this is all being recorded, so we will have this available to you for a reference, and I'll leave you with a few resources as well to help you get mapping. So we're going to be using 2 different tools today. The first one is called MapRoulette, and it is sort of a gamified approach to fixing similar instances of an issue or reviewing similar tasks iteratively throughout a given area. So we have a beginner task in MapRoulette that I'm going to go through. And then for more advanced users of OpenStreetMap, people who have edited before and are familiar with the JOSM editor, we will have projects in the tasking manager, which is a tool created by the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team to help grid up an area and divide it up into areas that individual users can go and map out so that people aren't duplicating efforts while they map. So we're going to have the third sort of more advanced track will be, again, using MapRoulette, but this will be to verify the object detection that we shared about earlier. So I'm just going to dive right in to MapRoulette. So to identify the projects that we're using today, you can go to MapRoulette.org. And I'll refresh this page here. And it will, if you haven't signed in to MapRoulette or you have used MapRoulette before, you'll need to authenticate your OpenStreetMap account up here in the top right. You'll see, it'll say, welcome back, please sign in. When you sign in, it will ask you to authorize your OpenStreetMap account. And it'll bring up your user dashboard. You can go over here to find challenges along the top. And you will see challenges for a number of projects throughout the world. So like I said, MapRoulette is really great at sort of giving you the same issue over and over again and fixing all instances of that issue in a given area. So you'll see things like missing settlements in Congo Central DRC, or unmapped towns in Ghana, or missing roads in Niagara, Ontario. They're all sort of very thematic in what they're trying to do, but you can quickly iterate through them and fix these issues. Well, to find the challenges that we're going to be working on today, you come up to this bar here and say, click on projects. And if you type in Maxar or MapGive, it's going to bring up this project that we have created for today's Mapathon. So we have 3 of them here. First is Nigeria floating roadways. Second is Nigeria possible bridges. And third is Nigeria ML facilities validation. So for beginners, if you are brand new to OpenStreetMap, I highly encourage you to select one of these 2 tasks. And what these are, we have a tool at Maxar that allows us to detect the quality of different topological and attribution errors within OpenStreetMap data. So we are able to identify certain floating roadways, which are roadways that are not connected to the broader network, as well as possible bridges, things like where highways are intersecting waterways, and potentially a bridge needs to be added on that highway feature. And so while these are clearly basic concepts to understand, these really have an impact on sort of the downstream uses of the data. If PEPFAR is trying to use OpenStreetMap data for routing to get to a rural community, if there are floating roadways in the data set, you will not be able to route over that road because it is disconnected from the rest of the network. So these are really important things that are necessary to help improve the integrity and the quality of OpenStreetMap data for its use for everyone. And what's really nice about it, these are really simple things to fix. So I'm going to walk you through these very briefly. So I'm going to select the Nigeria Floating Roadways challenge, and it'll bring you up and it'll show you sort of a full distribution of the errors that we're seeing. And so you can either zoom in and select a specific one, or the nice thing about MapRoulette, it'll just keep sending you to them. So you can just go ahead and select start, and it will bring you to the first instance. And so I'm going to zoom in a little bit. You can also toggle the layers so you can get an idea of maybe where it's disconnected before opening it in your editor. And we see we have this road that's just completely disconnected. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom into this area. It looks like it may connect over here. And I'm going to use the ID editor. So it'll say edit an ID web editor, and you select edit. And it's going to open up the ID editor in another window. If I zoom in here to this road, make sure I've got the Maxar imagery selected here in the background window. In most cases, the Maxar premium imagery is the most recent imagery available in a number of areas. So I'm going to use that to improve the location of this track. And I see that here, and I see that it ends right here at the water. So that's not disconnected. I'm going to improve this. I'm going to follow the way up to the other end, just improving it as I go along. And I actually want to see where the other end is. And it actually comes all the way over here to another, looks like intermittent waterway. And again, I just want to check along the way to see if there's another road that I could potentially connect it to make this road part of the network. It's really easy to end up going sort of down a rabbit hole of saying, oh, I'm going to map this road. Well, and then I need to map this road and that road and that road. In this case, we just want to focus on getting it connected sort of as quickly as possible to the main network. So I can see here that there is a path that connects to this path and then over to this road, and I can connect that to the network there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my line tool. I'm going to map it here. I'm going to stop that there because this is a separate roadway. And this is a minor road. I believe that's a track road. I'm going to map another road. And this one, because it actually goes through this seemingly residential area, I'm going to call this a residential road under minor. And now it's connected to those roads. So we can see we've now connected this track that was just sort of floating there. We've connected it back to the main network. And so all I need to do is upload my changes. And I see that my change set comment has already been populated. It says I fixed an unconnected highway. If I click upload, my changes will be uploaded to OpenStreetMap and be available for people to use. So that's all you have to do for that challenge. And once you've done that, you close out of your ID editor, and you'll notice that your menu has changed. You now have I fixed it, too hard, can't see, already fixed, or other, where there's skip and not an issue. Because I fixed it, I'm going to go ahead and say I fixed it, and it'll automatically bring me to the next location. If it was actually a highway that was, not connected to anything else, or no other tracks or smaller or minor roads coming off of it, you can say not an issue. If you see that it was already fixed, because when it was detected, maybe it's already been improved, someone's already been mapping in that area, we can say it's already fixed. Or if the imagery just isn't good enough in that area, maybe there's a big cloud in the way, you can say too hard, can't see. So I'm going to say I fixed it. If there's a specific comment that you want to add to it, added a road along the middle, this will be added into the campaign managers page so they can see if there's certain issues that keep cropping up. But I'm not going to add anything here. I'm going to say submit, and it's going to take me to a random task. You can see it brings you right to the next one. One thing to note with MapRoulette, when you click edit, it's going to try to bring you to the extent that you are viewing at. So just be warned, if you're sort of really zoomed out, you may end up trying to cover a much larger area than you need to. So just a hint about MapRoulette there. I'm going to hop into the other one real quick. That was floating roadways. This is the possible bridges challenge. And again, this is looking for where there are highways intersecting waterways. And in ID editor, these are really, really easy to fix if it is in fact a bridge. So I'm going to click edit. And I'm going to zoom into my area here. In this case, it's a little bit hard to see. I can see if I zoom out in the imagery. In fact, I can't even really verify that there is a waterway here. Although, because it's there's a lot of trees covering it, I'm not really confident removing that waterway. So I'm just going to say that this one is too hard and can't see. And it will bring me to the next one. So let's see what we have with this one. Again, here it looks like there maybe is a little bit of a canal running along here. And if I move the features out of the way a little bit, there may be a little bit of a bridge there. Again, in this case, I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to add it, but I do want to show you how I would add it if there were a bridge here. What you can do, you can see that this error pops up when I selected the road. You can say either connect using a ford being where you would have to cross the waterway on foot to continue that road, or you can add a bridge. So if there were a bridge there, I could say add a bridge. And what it does is it takes that segment that crosses the waterway and it creates a bridge. So then all you have to do is realign to where the ends of the bridge are. So pretty easy. And you would then upload your changes. I'm not going to upload these because, again, I'm not confident that there is a bridge there. So again, I will say too hard, can't see, and submit it. So those are the two beginner challenges that we have for new mappers or beginner mappers who are still sort of getting used to OpenStreetMap. They're pretty straightforward, and if you have questions on them, we'll make sure that we're online here to answer your questions in the chat as we go through them. For more advanced mappers who have used JOSM before, the Java OpenStreetMap editor, these are going to be more of your sort of traditional Mapathon projects that we have available. Working with Kiefer, we've identified a handful of areas near some hospitals that in the 3 cities that he mentioned that would really benefit from being mapped out further in OpenStreetMap. The only issue is these are incredibly dense areas. What the task manager allows us to do is load in imagery from an external source, and because these 3 cities are within the Maxar Open Data Program, we are able to upload the open data imagery to to something called Open Aerial Map, where you can share out imagery, and we use that imagery service to populate those images automatically for the metro areas that we're going to be editing. We will share out the 3 tasks as a link. Someone can share them in the chat. But again, if you are not an intermediate mapper, you actually won't even be able to get into the project. And so again, these are very dense areas, and you'll definitely want to have had some experience using it before. So what we're going to do, we're going to click contribute. This is project 9251 for Lagos. And we have identified a handful of areas in Lagos to support PEPFAR with their mapping. So what I'm going to do is, we have our instructions here, which go into pretty great detail of using the buildings tool and the terracer tool that is in the JOSM editor, and I'll show you how to install those when I get into JOSM. So what I'm going to do is select a task, say map selected task, and it's only going to let me use JOSM. Let me see that launch. And so you have to have JOSM open before you can actually open the mapped area in JOSM. So we can see all the data was added that's already in OpenStreetMap, and the imagery was also added automatically as well. We have this TMS layer up here that is the Maxar open data imagery that we've added. So like I mentioned, there's a couple tools that will make your job a whole lot easier when mapping in dense cities. And you can add them by going to the JOSM preferences and go to this puzzle piece, and that's the plugins menu. If it's your first time adding a plugin, you want to click download list, and it's going to retrieve the list of plugins. And I'm going to search for the buildings. So the buildings tool right here, this makes it really simple to draw buildings. And then also the terracer, that one right here, which allows you to create connected terraced buildings out of one larger building. So you'll click those check marks and then click OK. And then you're going to want to begin mapping. Oops, zoomed in way too far. So again, this can be a pretty dense area. If you haven't used the buildings tool before, you can use the hotkey B, or you can select the menu here, the draw buildings tool here. You just click and drag, and it draws your buildings much more quickly than drawing each individual node along the corner. And it's pretty simple. Oops, until I mess it up. There we go. So I also want to show you the terracer plugin. For instance, you may come across, again, very dense areas where there's multiple buildings sort of stacked right on each other. So I want to find an example of that where I can showcase the terracer tool. We can do something like this. So this looks like a pretty big warehouse. I'm going to hide this and pretend it hasn't been mapped for you. But you could potentially see that there are multiple streaks of multiple buildings here. So I could use the terracer plugin, or use the buildings tool plugin to first map, the larger cluster of buildings. And then when I select that building and go to more tools, you then click terrace a building, or you can use Shift-T. It'll bring up this menu for how many segments do you want to split it into. So if I thought there were 4 buildings there, I could say 4. Click OK. oops, and it drew them the opposite way, but I can rotate them pretty easily. And now I have 4 unique buildings, and I can then adjust them as necessary based on what I see in the imagery for where the buildings should be aligned. So that makes it a lot easier to add individual buildings as you're going along, especially in some of these more dense areas. And you will see a lot of those throughout the 3 cities that, that we're mapping in. So again, these projects are really for more advanced mappers who have used JOSM before and have been contributing to OSM for a while because you're already used to looking at imagery and might be able to better make some of those judgment calls about where buildings end and others begin. In the project, we will also link to a slide deck that you can use for just some of these basic JOSM tips that I've covered here. I'll add those in the projects right after I'm done demoing these. So we have 3 different projects in the tasking manager. The first one in Lagos, the second one in Ibadan. And again, these are not mapping the entire cities. While that would certainly be wonderful if we could map the entire cities in just a few days, we are focusing on sort of smaller, more manageable neighborhoods and communities to help support PEPFAR. And so we have just this one area in Ibadan, and then in Kano, there are a couple areas, one in sort of the center of the city, and then another near a hospital further out away from the central part of the city. Those are the tasking manager projects, again, for more advanced mappers, just because of the difficulty of and the density of the mapping and needing to use JOSM while you map. The third project, or the third track, again, is for more advanced mappers who are a bit more familiar with some of the tagging in OpenStreetMap, because we'll be validating a number of the features from the object detection that we've provided. So again, you can go to MapRoulette and search for Maxar or MapGive, and it will bring up this Nigeria ML facilities validation. But this one, you don't need to use JOSM. You'll be able to use the ID editor for this. So I'm going to go and click Start. And we have a list of instructions here with the different tags or features that you'll want to be familiar with. So with all of the different categories, you'll be brought to a bounding box of an area. So you'll see a category and it says, it'll say burial site, or it'll say hospital, or helipad, or sports facility. And these are the different tags of features that you can add to them. And so again, we're going to edit this in the ID editor, and we can see what the image is here. And since this one was listed as a cemetery, and it does look pretty similar to other cemeteries that I've seen in the area, so I'm going to map this as an area. I'm going to search for a cemetery. That's been added. There are, in the instructions, there are some slight differences in how you might tag things. If this were a burial site near or sort of attached to a church or a place of worship, it's going to be a graveyard instead of a cemetery, just due to how the OpenStreetMap tagging schema is set up. But again, you add the feature there, you upload, and your changes are there. And again, you can come back and say, I fixed it, and you can it will take you automatically to the next one. I do want to find an example of, well, here's one. This one was detected as a sports facility. And most of the sports facilities are going to be sort of open fields that are possibly used as a soccer pitch or something like that. You may not be 100% be able to tell. And we don't want to be putting presumptuous data into OpenStreetMap. That's not what we want to do. We want to be sure about what we're adding. This is definitely an open area, but it could be sort of a parade ground for a military barracks, or it could be a gathering space for a community center, things like that. So unless you see sort of the lines on the field or the goals, I would not tag it as a pitch. But we can still add good information about this area that's been identified to OpenStreetMap. So we can see a few different things. We can see a wall surrounding the area. And so I can add the barrier wall feature to the map. And again, just because it may not exactly be the feature that we were looking for, you can still add useful data to OpenStreetMap in the area that we're looking. So I'm going to add this as a building. Make sure I square my building. And this will be particularly useful for some of the object detections that have been identified as hospitals. Unless you see maybe a helipad or some sort of medical infrastructure that will absolutely tell you that this is a hospital. We don't necessarily want to tag it as a hospital, but we can still tag and map out all the buildings within sort of the broader campus of it. And then, that's where it's great to be able to have partners with HIU and with youth mappers and with local universities. If people are going near that area, you can confirm whether or not it's a hospital and come back to OpenStreetMap and correctly add that data. And those buildings have already been mapped out. So with that, those are the three tracks, if you will, of ways to contribute as a part of this Mapathon. We very much encourage people to, not just map today, but continue mapping throughout the weekend. I think next week, we're going to take a look and sort of see how far everything has gotten. I'll certainly be spending some time over the weekend mapping in some of the more difficult areas. But we're really excited to be doing this and have sort of a plethora of available options for people to be mapping.
Thank you very much, Matt. Well, I am eager to get started. I like to consider myself an advanced mapper, but I'm going to be trying all of the tests, all the MapRoulette tests, and also Ethan Justin as well, including the Terracer tool, which I'm not very familiar with. Again, to remind everybody, if you have any questions, you could use the Q&A and we'll try to answer you.
Yeah, I think I see one question. So what I'm thinking is that for the next 30 minutes or so, everybody should just feel free to go ahead, if they haven't already, and start contributing to the project that you think is the best fit for you. And I'm seeing a question in the chat that might be helpful for us to start going over now. I think if while you're getting started, you start having questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we can keep our screen shares on and try to go through them one by one.
I do see a question from Lucas Steinbridge about moving streets and roads, and hopefully we caught him before he had to go to class. But within the ID editor, you can actually just click on the nodes. It'll sort of highlight a white dot, and you can click and drag that. And so I just dragged it out of the way so that I could see what was underneath, and then I moved it right back. Or you can do Control Z to undo your move. And Erica, would you be able to put up the slide again that had all the task numbers on it? I think that was somewhere in the slides.
Yep. I'm going to need to take the presentation privileges back from you for a second. Great. Okay, they should be up on the screen now for everybody to see. Looks like Luke is caught. Thanks to your quick answer. Does anybody on the panel want, I'm saying this because I don't bring it up myself, but if anybody wants to share their screen, we can make it happen just one person at a time. We want mentorship or oversight while you're working, or we could do that ourselves and set some good examples for folks. Any takers? Let us know in the chat. Kiefer, which project are you working on? Did you embrace participating in example for the mappers?
I'm currently working on the possible bridges.
Do you want to share a few examples of what you're working on so people can just follow along?
I wish I could, but this computer will not allow that. It will definitely crash it.
That's fair. That's what I had in mind for them as well, because they sharing the process. I know what you're doing, so FYI for the group that we'll be sending the recording out in a thank you email for joining us today, and we'll be posting it on the MapGive YouTube channel. I'm gonna go ahead and we'll trim this video down a little bit, but I'll go ahead and close the recording now. If nobody wants their mapping practice to be recorded.
So there was one question about, I edited a road in OpenStreetMap and uploaded it, but I am not seeing my edits when I get back to MapRoulette. Is this expected, or do I need to take additional action to sync them? So you won't necessarily see your edit immediately reflected. Those need to be updated in the rendering of the map tiles, which can sometimes take 10, 15 minutes to happen. But you can be assured that it says, once it says you have uploaded your data to OpenStreetMap, it's there and it has been collected in OSM. The other thing you can do, I mean, it's not going to necessarily talk to MapRoulette, but the data that's in MapRoulette is purely just it's data from a given time. So we took that data from OSM that was floating highways, and we plugged it into MapRoulette, so that data doesn't change. But the data in OSM does. So rest assured, your edits are captured and good to go. And all you need to do in MapRoulette is say you fixed it. And then Ross, I saw your question, and I think it had come to me directly as well. You had asked how will these identified features be incorporated into the AI engines as training sets? And so the identified features, these bounding boxes that we use to build the MapRoulette challenge, those are the original outputs from the ML process. But then whatever is mapped in OpenStreetMap is an open data set that anyone can use for training data. So if we determine that one of these burial sites is actually a farmyard or something, that data can be taken back from OpenStreetMap to improve the ML model. And a number of organizations are using OpenStreetMap for training data because it truly is a global data set available to everyone. Nancy, you said, what if I get a road segment and it's really far away from any previously other mapped road? That's a tough one because there are some where it's really floating. I would say, if you can find, and you feel comfortable doing it, mapping out a little bit of where it does connect to. Even if you don't get all the way through it, if you're getting it closer to where the where the sort of main network is, that's incredibly helpful as well. So that way you're not necessarily left with just one floating highway, but you can at least improve sort of a broader area that you're looking in. And then maybe we rerun the tool and we identify that it's just that much closer that we can continue to map towards those. To completing the network.
Another question. Okay, so I'm seeing a few questions, which I would think all might be for Matt or Madison. So see what you think. So the first question is, how is AI used here? And the second questions are a little bit more technical. So do you want to take a whack at sort of explaining the way that AI is incorporated into workflows? Or do you want to maybe do some of the more technical?
Sure. So AI here is being used, and remember I sort of mentioned the broad topic of artificial intelligence, and it's taking a task that a human can do and giving it to a machine or a computer system. And so things like identifying these errors, identifying the errors that we see for floating highways, those are, typically it would take a human to look through all of these, different roadways and identify that it hasn't been connected to another highway. And then on the machine learning side of that, the MapRoulette task showing the facilities and different objects that are being detected, that's providing the machine that we're training an input data set saying, here are a bunch of sports facilities. Here's a bunch of soccer fields trained over a certain area. We provide that input data set, and it provides an output. and then we can provide more training to improve the process so that the results are more accurate. And so that's where artificial intelligence and machine learning is sort of tying into these different campaigns. So again, it's not to replace human mappers. It's to make their job easier. So now if PEPFAR wants to know where all the potential bridges are in any given city because they have certain size trucks or something that they need to transport materials for their vaccination campaigns. You want to know where bridges are where you potentially may need to cross water. And so that's really important to sort of supporting whatever mission your organization has. Erica, you said there was like a more technical question as well?
Yeah, so the next question was whether it was, well, I guess there are two questions. So the first question was from Sean, who's a beginner working on the Nigeria floating roadways project, and they were wondering whether the MapRoulette point counter was supposed to increase as we fix roadways. So
yes, it should. So when you click, if you click I fixed it, I believe it goes up by 5. So if you click on my points that's up in the top, it'll bring you to sort of this global leaderboard. And then you scroll down and it will show, it's going to show, the top 10 mappers who've been using MapRoulette, but then it'll show you and sort of what your rank is and sort of the global MapRoulette pool. So I can see that I'm not sharing my screen anymore, but I can see that I have 711 points. So if you click I fixed it, I believe it goes up by 5. If you say it was already fixed, it's either 2 or 3 points. And those are pretty arbitrary. But again, it's just sort of a nice way to see your efforts being rewarded with points. So it could potentially take a few minutes to update. I'm not entirely sure if there's any sort of lag or delay. But yeah, just make sure that you're clicking, you've gone back to MapRoulette and you've said, I fixed it to sort of move on to the next task. And yeah, Sean just said his increase. So there may be a slight delay as you go through, but it is being noted that you clicked I fixed it. And the other thing that's really cool, just sort of an aside, these are, the hot tasking manager and MapRoulette. These are not Maxar tools. These are not State Department tools. These are tools available to the OpenStreetMap community, which have, many have been developed by volunteers or a small group of developers and have gone through many different iterations. And so it's really great that we have a number of different applications that we can use to really target where we want to map to support things that HIU is doing or that PEPFAR is doing or the Red Cross is doing, things like that.
So I am getting some messages that just again wondering about the recording. I wanted to share a second reminder that we will definitely be uploading the majority of this to our YouTube channel, and we'll be sending it out in a link to everybody who's able to register. So if you do know anybody that has network issues or difficulty joining with the link, then please do send that their way. And if you know anybody that was interested in doing today but couldn't make it, but thinks that you think that this might be helpful workforce for them, or that they might have a good use for the data, then just also feel free to reach back out to us. We'll also be sending our contact information to attendees afterwards, or anybody that would like to stay in touch with us. So please consider us very available and approachable for any kind of follow-up. Also, Matt, just saying, I passed you the presenter ball in case you get any more technical questions that you think would be easier to share your screen for. You should be able to do that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So someone posted, if I map with Rapid in MapRoulette, it just opens the Rapid editor and doesn't go to the feature in question. So there may be a handful of projects in MapRoulette that use Facebook's Rapid editor. Those are really useful in areas where you're adding buildings, or you're specifically looking at their roads data set to add in. If it doesn't bring you, I haven't used Rapid in MapRoulette that often. My mouse just died, so that's great. So I would, let me get back into the challenge here.
One thing you might be able to do is try to make attendees panelists for briefly. It might depend if somebody was familiar with WebEx, but we might be able to allow people to share their screens and you can walk them through some of their questions. So I know you had a kind of specific question. You could give it a try if you want. You can let us know in the chat if that sounds good. But otherwise, I see that pulling the screen up, so that might.
Yeah, I'll see if I can replicate the issue. So again, I recommend using, at least for these challenges, just use regular ID editor, which should be the default one. It's the first one at the top here. If you want to use Rapid, let's see, I'm going to click it and see what happens. And actually, this one actually did bring me up to the same location, because this was the road I had selected. So I'm not sure if maybe you had previously been using Rapid, and maybe it tried to load in a different area. But it would be interesting. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure in this case.
Let's see, just going through the chat right now in the Q&A. Seeing people walk themselves through some of their own troubleshooting in the chat. Totally fine. Happy to attest to that. Does anybody want to say in the chat if they're on the beginner task or the intermediate task? I'm really interested in knowing sort of what the breakdown is of the segments of people that we've got here. I wonder how many people are on MapRoulette beginner, how many people are in advanced, is anybody task manager? What are people working on?
So I do see a question about Nigeria floating roadway project, how is the feature in question identified in each frame? I think there's sort of multiple ways to answer that. The features are identified by a tool that we have at Maxar, which takes all the data for a country and will spit out all the areas based on errors, rather, based on certain criteria. So there is a chance that some of these have already been fixed between the time when we ran the tool a week or so ago to now when we're actually kicking off the project. So, you may get some sort of false positives in that sense because someone has already fixed it. But then sort of the other way to answer it, if I was misunderstanding your question, would be you can identify the project because it should, or the feature because it should bring you straight into that feature directly in the center of your screen when you open the editor. So hopefully one of those two comments was your question, and I hope I answered it for you. I think there was another question that I can, what do you put when you do not know if it is a road or a path? So a good way to, a good sort of rule of thumb is if it looks like something that only a four-wheel drive vehicle could go down, I would probably call that a track. If you're absolutely not sure, you can just type in road, and there's a road feature, which is really only supposed to be sort of a temporary thing until you can identify, the proper classification for it. But if you're absolutely not sure, you can just say road, and that's still an allowed tag that we can someone else can take a look and see what a more specific classification might be.
I have a question for you, Matt.
Sure.
So the MapRoulette bridges, since it's kind of more geared towards beginners, when they encounter something like when they're looking at a bridge and there's a water line that doesn't match the imagery, like the imagery looks like there's no water features, that's beyond their scope to like try to change that water feature, right?
Yeah, that's where I would probably say it's a little bit out of scope, just because it could potentially be sort of an intermittent stream. If it's something that's been, paved over, and clearly there's not going to be water there again, that's a case where you can remove that. I would say just a small segment of the waterway to be sure, but I wouldn't. I try to avoid removing data in OSM as much as possible, unless I'm sure.
So maybe if the imagery shows that, I mean, it might be intermittent stream, but if the imagery shows like a road that's clearly not a bridge, maybe just trim the stream so it's not conflicting with that road anymore.
Yep.
Gotcha.
I can probably share my screen and find an example because I'm sure, the other thing about OSM is, there could have been data, waterway data added a long, long time ago that is no longer accurate. So I'll just grab a new task here. Oops, now I'm editing in Rapid. Didn't want to do that. Yeah, so here's sort of a good example. I wouldn't necessarily remove the waterway here because you can actually see that there's sort of a greener patch here. My guess would be that this is more, again, of like maybe a runoff stream. So I can actually, improve this a little bit. I don't see a bridge there, but if there is water flowing under it, it could be a culvert. So if in using ID, if you wanted to add a bridge, you would have selected the highway and clicked add a bridge. But if it was clearly, a culvert or something, or a tunnel going under the road, you could say add a tunnel after having selected the waterway, and it's going to add that tunnel feature onto the waterway. ID editor has made it, the developers working on ID rather have made it so ID is really getting good to have these one-click fixes for a number of very common tags.
And we should be using the Maxar imagery, not the big imagery, or does it not matter? Well, I'm clearly biased. I do like to use the Maxar premium imagery. We don't have the specific open data images for these projects because these projects are actually countrywide. These are finding instances of the issues all over the country, where we only have the imagery available for these 3 cities. What I have noticed, and it's not always the case, but the Maxar premium imagery does tend to be a bit more up to date in most areas than the other layers. I won't say that's 100% true all the time, but I personally tend to use the Maxar premium more than the other layers.
Thank you for giving us your honest answer.
Oh, camera's over here.
So seeing another question from Devin, he asks, how much time, if any, should we be spending tagging missing roads as we see them while connecting floating roads?
I mean, that's kind of up to you. So the nice thing about MapRoulette is, you can go and fix that, just that direct issue and, and say, hey, I fixed it, I connected it to another road and I'm good to go. If you feel comfortable adding in even more roads, and again, trying to get it back to the main network if possible, you can do that. But like I said, it is pretty easy to end up going down a rabbit hole pretty quickly because there is a lot of unmapped highways in OpenStreetMap. And so I would say I personally wouldn't spend more than 5 minutes on a MapRoulette task, just because the goal of that challenge is to fix as many of those issues as possible. If you are still trying to connect it back to the main network, I would, if you, depending on how far you've gone, again, you could say, I added another road, so at least it's getting a little bit closer to where we thought it would be, and that you can say that's good enough. It won't have completely fixed the issue, but it's getting closer, and you're contributing to the map in a positive way. I think I just saw Erica post a question about has anyone gotten to 100 points yet? So we can actually look at the leaderboard here for the bridges. Leslie _ has 38 points so far. A good job. Let's check out the other one. Ooh, Catherine K is at 93 points on the floating roadways. Awesome. The other thing, it sometimes is a little bit lagging, but we can go to missingmaps.org and they have an edits leaderboard. And again, this may not be completely up to the minute, but but we can add in the hashtag that we're using, which is MapGive Maxar Mapathon, and it pops up here. And we can start to see, yeah, so it looks like none of the edits have started processing yet. But, over the next couple of days, you'll probably see, your number of edits and your kilometers of road, especially start to add up. So we'll keep an eye on this over the next couple of days just to see where things end up. Let's check out the tasking manager campaigns. Is anybody working in the tasking manager? No one in the Lagos.
Since I'm not as familiar with MapRoulette, I think usually I would have gravitated towards the tasking with the most familiar sort of Mapathon option, but MapRoulette is the star for me today.
Yeah, and and sometimes don't get as many more advanced mappers. But again, even if you've been mapping in OpenStreetMap for years, MapRoulette is a really great way to just sort of unwind and quickly go on repeat for a number of issues.
That's true. And I think it's fair that this doesn't need to be the only time that there's people or that anybody's working on this project. These are definitely, these projects are live and open to the public until they're completed. So you can find them at these links after this event ends until they are 100% done. And we definitely encourage everyone to spend carve out 30 minutes, carve out an hour, set another follow-up goal of another 100 points, just to continue advancing project progress. Know that we're nearing the end of the event of today's Mapathon. We're almost at 6 o'clock. I'm hesitating to close us out just to give people a few more minutes to keep working. I think we'll map right up until 6, just to get as much done as possible and be available to offer any extra questions you might have. And I think I'm not sure if he's still able to be in the call right now, but one thing that I think that we're looking forward to is having this event or this Mapathon be a way that we get to know more people who are working in Nigeria on these kinds of projects, and people who think that this kind of data would be useful for them. And so I know that Victor and I have been talking on the side from Victor, some of these mappers in Nigeria, was interested in hosting a follow-up training on this. I think that that's a really fantastic idea to maybe host a second event that's at a friendlier time zone, that's on a friendlier time zone scheduling, so that we can have more people who are focused on these areas joining us.
I'm really trying to not mess up since I'm sharing my screen. This super complex building.
Very soothing. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
I see some line conflicts.
So I'm seeing a message from a long poster who I'm very sorry if I've butchered the name, but seeing a message that says they're interested in volunteering as a mapper in Nigeria, which is really exciting. It's a really exciting message to see. And I think that we would definitely like, if Victor or if anybody from these mappers is on the line, I think that would be, or in the chat, I think that would be my suggestion for a group of people to get in touch with. And if it can't happen through the chat tonight, we can just be sure to follow up afterwards with anybody who's just interested in sticking to this kind of work and doing more of it.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I really messed everything up. Caitlin says her points have not uploaded in a while. I'm assuming you're using the ID editor and you've gone, and is it just sort of spinning with, yeah, like it says it's uploading? Because it could potentially be sort of an internet connection. Also, if you had too many upload or too many edits, you know, in sort of the neighborhood of like 100 edits, you know, it might take a little bit longer to upload. But I'm not 100% sure. I do know when I first tried to upload when I was demoing, it did take longer than I originally expected. So, I mean, one thing you can do is just refresh your browser window for that particular ID editor. Your edits should still be there. They'll show up as like you just haven't uploaded them yet. So it might be worth refreshing and trying to upload them again.
Yeah, I really liked that in the tasking manager. I'm not sure when they made the update. I know that it was a long time ago, but I really liked when they changed it. So depending on the more and more edits that you made, so if you made 10 edits without saving, the icon of your number of edits is gray. If you start making 50 edits without saving, it's turning yellow. If you're making 100 edits without saving, it really gives you a reminder and turns like bright red, and it's like, stop what you're doing, save your work. So I need that reminder. I don't know if MapRoulette also does that, but it puts your mind at ease. I also wanted to highlight something that Violet had mentioned in the Q&A. She basically mentioned that she was new to this, and I'm sorry, Violet, for putting on the spot, but she mentioned that she's new to this and they're needing to start over again, and the next time that she opens the project. And I think that that's really fair, and I just wanted to highlight for everyone that we know that we've thrown a lot of different, possibly very new projects out there today, and that's why we're recording this event, so that people can go back and review the training and even see some of this Q&A back and forth whenever you'd like. And that's why we want to make sure that we're available to everyone, because we know that it's a lot to sink in, especially for anybody that was just downloading the streetmap.org account today. It's a lot. So if this is not like crystal clear to anybody right now, I just want to say that it should not be discouraging, and that, you know, please stick with it and try it.
I was not muted. Sorry about that.
It's okay. It's the road.
The other thing I was going to mention about that topic is Learn OSM is a great resource for learning about OpenStreetMap. So learnosm.org has a huge number of resources available to people. to, from all the way from making your first edit all through, more advanced editing with Jonathan.
While we get ready to wrap up, I wanted to share the Mentimeter map. It's not the word cloud that we made, where it's everyone's location. I thought a lot of people were able to answer the survey in the last few minutes.
I have to hop off, but thanks everybody for joining in, and we'll keep mapping over the next several days.
Well, thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for joining us today. This has been a great experience, and even working in GIS for as many years as I have, always learning new things and having an experience to do new types of mappings and new ways to contribute. So really looking forward to diving in and spending a lot more time with all this.